Here today, and it's even more of a pleasure to see so many of you out here at a JFK Assassination conference, and I think most of you are probably in the camp of Oswald was innocent, or at least you're in the camp of, I think there's a serious question about Oswald's participation. First off, let me ask this. How many people here are from the news media here locally? Anybody out there? No, of course not. I mean, it's only happening in downtown Dallas in the center of the city, and we've got several hundred people here, you know, and we're talking about serious matters. Why should the news media pay any attention? Well, and that prompts me to mention the experience we've just gone through, which some people call an election. Let me tell you the truth of the matter. This was not an election. This was a referendum on the New World Order, and we kicked them in the teeth. And even though right now it looks like, well, it was really squeaky clean, you know, oh, almost. I mean, and I was saying months before that the game plan was to run the numbers up as close as they could so they could fudge them, okay? Drop a decimal point here or there and push it to Hillary. But I'm telling you, the people in this country woke up. They realized that the national mass media is just lying to them, that these polls are skewed, okay? And I want to tell y'all, if it wasn't for the rampant voter fraud that took place, I think you would have seen the popular vote go to Trump by about 80%, okay? But even with the massive voter fraud, which by the way didn't just start this year, I mean it's been going on ever since Lyndon Johnson and Box 13, you know. But it's gotten worse and worse with this computer thing because I know there were so many instances here in Texas where people reported going to the polls and trying to vote a straight Republican ticket, and then before the whole thing clicked off, it flipped to a Democratic ticket, okay? Now that kind of stuff, you know, with these, I'm trying to tell people, I'll tell you all, we'll never again have an honest election until we return to paper ballots that we can go back and count, okay? And poll watchers. Okay, now a lot of you younger folks, anybody under 50 probably doesn't even know what a poll watcher is. Each party, every party represented, even any party not represented on the ballot. In fact, even as a private citizen, you have a right to go to your polling place and tell them you're a poll watcher. And you can't interfere with anything, you can't say anything, you can't hold up signs, but you can stand there and watch the vote all day long. Now, if we were to return to paper ballots and poll watchers, we'd go back to having honest elections. But John's already, again, stole my thunder. I mean, we all know what has happened to this country since John F. Kennedy was killed. All right? But here today, we are still sifting through the details. I keep having people who have not paid much attention to the subject, they continue to ask me, will we ever know what happened? You know, excuse me, we know now, right? We know. We don't know all the details, and frankly, I hate to tell you this, we may go to our graves not knowing all the details, okay? But we know enough. We know enough. We know that by the fall of 1963, John Kennedy had managed to alienate almost every stout, violent faction in this country. The mafia, his brother was prosecuting the mafia as never before or since. The war in Vietnam, okay, yes, he had caved into the Pentagon, but between the time he took office and the time he was assassinated, he did approve the a rise in the military advisors in Vietnam. But I guarantee you, in my mind, and I think most of you will agree with me, John F. Kennedy would never have allowed the introduction of ground combat troops in South Vietnam. I'm just convinced of that. And of course that comes back to National Security Action Memorandum 273, which he said he agreed with the report of the McNamara report, which said we'll be able to disengage and get out of Vietnam by 1965. And in there it also says, make no public announcement, but begin the withdrawal of 1,000 military advisors by the end of 1963. Okay, so he was taking immediate steps to disengage us from Vietnam. Now, what happened? Well, he's killed on Friday. On Monday, November the 25, you got President Johnson issuing National Security Action Memorandum 274, which says, well, our position in Vietnam remains unchanged, so that would stop most people from reading the rest of it because, oh, it's unchanged. And yet, if you continue reading, you say, however, we will not reduce any military or economic aid since the time of the DM brothers. Well, they were murdered on November the 1st, 1963, which essentially says that blocked the pullout order for the 1,000 military advisors. And of course, it was they kept building up in Vietnam, and by August of 1964, we had the phony Gulf of Tonkin incident, which never even happened. Okay, and that's been admitted to. This big article in U.S. News and World Report some years back said the phony battle that led to war. All right, and then Johnson, of course, fully knowing what's going on, goes to Congress and says, our bodies are floating in the water. Give me the power to respond to this provocation. And they passed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which abrogated the Constitution of the United States, which clearly states only Congress shall have the power to declare war. And they gave it to Johnson. And then immediately by September of 1964, he introduced Marine combat troops in Vietnam. The Army began to build up, and we went on to have that debacle that we now know as the Vietnam War. Okay, in 1962, the Kennedy Tax Act. You had people like Exxon who had refineries in the Bahamas, and they weren't paying taxes on it because it wasn't in the United States. And in the Kennedy Tax Act of 1962, we find that he starts closing these loopholes for the giant corporations. Now they're against him, all right? And so he, now he's got the mafia against him, got the military against him, got the CIA against him, because he told the New York Times, after the Bay of Pigs, he was going to take the CIA and splinter it into 1,000 pieces and cast it to the winds. He's going to do away with it, as well we should. And while he's at it, I wish he'd take the TSA too. I mean, you all do know how many terrorists the TSA has caught, right? None. But boy, they're groping Granny. Bunch of idiots. Thankfully, one time I said, I'm not going in that full body scanner. I said, that's got that terahertz radiation and it decouples your DNA. I said, I don't think I'm going to go in that. They said, well, you have to go for a pat down. And I said, nah, I don't know. Acting real dumb, real old, which I kind of am. wasn't hard to act like that. But I actually got them to grope each other. The guy says, no, we just use the back of our hand. We do that. I'm going, oh, what? You know? So he gets another TSA guy over there and he gropes him. All right. All right, so there, Kennedy's, he's pissed off everybody. And everybody got together. All right, and there was a consensus reached. And the people at the very top, and I'll tell you, this isn't the absolute top of the food chain, but at the near top of the food chain was Allen Dulles, who'd been fired by head of the CIA, okay, and yet remained on board for another year, and really got it all set up, especially with his underlings, whose loyalty was not to Kennedy, but to Allen Dulles. And then also, of course, they had to bring in Lyndon Johnson and his next door neighbor and old buddy, J. Edgar Hoover. So now they know they can control the investigation no matter what happens. And that's why the Kennedy assassination, I always tell young people that's the place to start, because it was one of the first, and it was a prototype, and as such there were glitches and there were problems. And that's why you can still see what's going on. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir here because most of you people have already read that stuff. If you don't know some of these details, read my book. And by the way, in case you didn't know, a lot of you may have read the original Crossfire, which came out in the 80s. And I'm still very, very proud of that because when I did this 2013 update and revision, there was very little to revise because I'm a journalist. I pledge to be a journalist. I try to be a journalist, and that means I don't just take anything at face value, and that I double check my sources, sometimes triple check my sources. And what I put down in that book is, for the most part, as valid today as it was then. But there's more now because, number one, I got to have a picture section like I really wanted. Have a picture of the badge man, the guy firing from behind the fence on the grassy knoll. Have a picture of the smoke drifting off the grassy knoll, which of course we were told for years, well, that can't happen because modern rifles don't smoke. Well, excuse me, yes they do, okay? Especially if they're freshly oiled, because the oil burns off and comes out as a big white puff of smoke. And I have a photograph of it in my book. On and on. One of the things I'm most proud of is that I went, and now, how simple is this? There were these two surveyors, Bob West, who was the official county surveyor for Dallas, and then his buddy Chester Brenneman, who then worked with Bob and then went on to do survey work as the official surveyor of Eastland County out in West Texas. Well, years ago, as a reporter, I got hold of both of them. And Chester Brenneman was kind enough to let me copy their original plat map of Dealey Plaza that they had done for the Warren Commission. Actually, they did two. The Monday following the assassination, both Bob West was hired to do survey work in Dealey Plaza for Life magazine. And I don't have to go into CIA connections to Life magazine. Chester Brenneman just happened to be in the office with him. He says, hey, come on, help me. He said, okay. And then later that spring, both of them did the survey work for the Warren Commission. Chester Brenneman was kind enough to let me copy his original plat map, and I